Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of Moon Knight, The Tomb. And this was a pretty decent episode. I really kind of enjoyed this one because we got a little bit sprinkled throughout here, and this was more of a kind of Indiana Jones-esque kind of escapade of what's going on, and we got introduced to some other kind of mythological creatures as stuff was kind of going down in Amit's tomb. So, one of the kind of cool things that we see that starts off this episode is that someone is taking Khonshu's Ushabti to someplace, the little stone statue. And then we see that it's put in a little place, and then we pan out and we see that this group, the Ennead, has done this to other gods before. So evidently the Egyptian gods had their own kind of like thing going on where they essentially Pokemon the other gods that aren't doing either what they should be doing or are potentially going against the will of a certain kind of few. So there's a lot of kind of cool possibilities that I would hope would be kind of introduced here, but we'll kind of have to see. There's a lot of potential here. However, again, we'll have to see how they're able to like execute on that potential. So we get back to Mark and Layla, and she's trying to kind of like wake him up, and then suddenly out of nowhere we get this weird random fucking vehicle that is loaded for bear with like machine guns and ammo. It's just, this whole scene really only made sense to me when I'm figuring out that this is supposed to showcase how Layla's character kind of tactically assesses and deals with situations. However, there was like better kind of examples of this later on in the episode. So they're kind of like circling around. They see Mark's kind of unconscious body, and Layla's got to kind of figure out what to do, and she's able to kind of like muck with him a bit, utilizes a flare, and then throws it onto their ammo, kind of blows up and mucks with them, and then they just start like driving off towards the coordinates for Amit's tomb. And then Steven is the one that wakes up in control of the body, and he starts having kind of an argument between Steven and Mark, because he's like, just give me the body, I'll do this kind of shit. And he's like, that's not what we agreed to. I'd help you, and I get the body. And then Layla's like, oh, cool that Mark didn't put me in on that kind of shit. And they're like, alright, let's just kind of deal with this at this moment. And she's like, just kind of like, wow, I can't believe Mark would do that, but that's kind of his thing. And he's like, yeah, I was going to tell you, it's just, it never kind of popped up at the correct time. It's like, yeah, that's kind of something Layla should know, Steven. Not that he was the one kind of like keeping it from her. Then they're able to kind of get to Amit's tomb, and we see that all of the, like, there's nobody there. We also see some blood and like strange implements, which I think would have been better utilized inside the tomb proper once we kind of learn what's kind of going on with it, because it would more make sense that that would be going on in the tomb rather than them being able to kind of like pop out like that. So Layla's like, alright, let's kind of like look for supplies and everything like that. Mark is like, don't you lay a finger on Layla, and he's like, whatever, screw you, man, because they're in each other's heads. They kind of know kind of what's going on, even though certain things could potentially be walled off. And that he understands that Steven is developing feelings for Layla, and he's kind of like she's kind of helping him get like all outfitted and everything, and she's kind of like leaning in to kiss him, and then he blurts out that Mark has pretty much pushed her away because Khonshu's interested in her being the next Avatar and everything like that, and she's like, wow, that's a big kind of thing, and of course, she's like, wow, you're like the honesty ass. Like, you're very much into being honest. Like, yep, I am. And then he leans in and initiates a kiss. And then she kind of goes into the tomb. And then a kind of funny bit is that we see that Mark pretty much takes control of his hand and punches Steven. So that's a kind of interesting bit. I could see how that could be kind of problematic for certain people, using it as kind of a punchline kind of thing, but I think it was executed well enough that like Mark's like, do not touch my wife, and then he's able to get enough control of the body to be like, you fuck. And it's got its comedic aspects, but it's showing the division of Mark and Steven when it's like you gotta try and figure out how to deal with that shit in your head and everything. Because with what we're going on and what we kind of learned throughout with what's going on with Mark and what happened to kind of make him Khonshu's avatar, I have suspicions about his partner. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So Layla gets down, is looking at all this stuff, like, wow, this is actually a pretty cool tomb. And then, of course, Steven falls down. He's like, well, that didn't work out. And he's like, then starts fanning out as well. Like, wow, I almost expect this Sphinx to like come to life and start doing riddles and stuff. And then Layla kind of gives us a little bit more information on her father, how he was an archaeologist on a mission, and pretty much that mission was to prove that the Egyptian gods walk among us. Ding, ding, ding. Yes. So it's kind of interesting. It's like, yes, he wasn't just an archaeologist and a historian. He had a mission to prove. And that, of course, can also lead to obsessions and everything. And we see that Layla's like, she really wasn't into the obsession aspect that he had. And it's very interesting because Mark has the same kind of obsessive nature of what he needs to do to try and make sure that Khonshu doesn't take over Layla and make her the new avatar because of all the kind of crazy stuff is. And so he'll do anything to kind of stop that. Now, granted, we don't know how far Layla's father went, but we do learn that it eventually leads to his death. So they're kind of walking around. We get this nice kind of creepy aspect. We learn that this is done into a maze in the shape of the High of Horus. Horus being a very influential figure in Egyptian mythology. And it's like, oh, cool. Steven's able to kind of calculate all the different kind of stuff, and since they're looking for the voice of Ahmet, it would be safer to go through the route that would lead them on the branch that denotes the voice. It's like, alright, cool, let's kind of do this. And the thing is, they do a very good job of setting the atmosphere and tone for this, because you really get the sense that you are in an ancient tomb of like a pharaoh or somebody very important, and that there's an unsettling aspect of stuff going on because they can hear certain things. They see blood around and viscera when they get to a certain room, and Steven is like, that ain't his bag. I'm like, yeah, I get you, Steven. I get you there. Now, granted, if I need to stop like a world-ending entity, I'd go a little bit like, oh, and then I'd just be like, all right, if I don't want to see worse shit than this, I gotta get to stopping this. Because we see that there are priests buried into this tomb as well. I believe that they were called Hexa. And that we see them doing all this kind of stuff. We hear gunfire in the distance, and we see that there's blood and bones in this one pathway, and Steven's like, I'm gonna try and find something else. And he gets up top, he's like looking through, he's seen all the different kind of things around. He's like, hey, there's something up here. And then we hear this creature coming in, and it's one of the undead priests that guard the tomb. And I had very kind of like mummy kind of vibes from it, like the Brendan Fraser one. You know what I mean? Now, granted, there are better effects right now, but you see that this like priest drags this dude in who's still alive and starts performing mummification rituals on the dude to kind of like kill him, as Layla's trying to like scooch around this the operating table, if you will. Even though she accidentally hits something, Steven like tries to get the attention of the thing. He's like, oh, this fucking thing is creepy as shit. Now, we never get a very, very good look at it. I don't know if it's kind of reptilian or kind of snakish or whatnot, because we do see other kind of things of snakes around. But we do kind of get a good enough look with Layla, but it's still kind of dark enough that I don't get a complete good track on what it is. I actually had to turn out the lights at certain aspects to get a better shot because of kind of how dark it was. Granted, it does not approach the levels of Game of Thrones fuckery of it's like, yeah, let's use natural lighting. Alright, I can't see jack fucking shit. That does not happen here. It's a little bit hard to see. So, if you have kind of vision problems, this one might irk you in certain aspects. Except for the end, because it then goes fucking white. So it's like, hey, I can't see because it's dark too. Ah, my retinas! I didn't get that kind of reaction. Because it didn't just blind me completely. They at least transitioned enough, but know that that kind of happens. So they're now separated. They're kind of getting chased into different directions. Steven's like, I'll find you. and goes kind of deeper in. Layla, let's see. So then they get split up. I'm going to hold off on the Steven stuff first. Then we pretty much see Layla kind of like going through the rest of the kind of tomb, trying to get through this one aspect. This thing kind of grabs her, and we see her resourcefulness of fighting this thing, even though it's kind of a weird, strange, supernatural being that you probably really wouldn't have dealt with mostly before. And it's like trying to like get at her, but she utilizes a flare to pretty much pop it in its eye, and then like kind of throws it off of a cliff kind of thing as things are kind of falling apart and everything. The usual kind of tomb stuff. And I don't consider that a negative. I'm like, I like that kind of tomb stuff and seeing what's kind of going on. You get a real kind of that mixture of the Mummy and Indiana Jones kind of vibe going on. I'm like, yes, thank you. This is kind of cool, especially when we had seen Layla and Steven kind of trying to track to the tomb. They did really kind of cool shots of just showing different kind of landscapes and everything and what their kind of trek kind of entails. It really didn't achieve much in any kind of storytelling otherwise than just like showcasing the place and how they're kind of getting from point A to point B. Well, then we see that like Layla sits up, and then Arthur Harrow's over there, starts explaining that he had a hard time dealing with Mark and like using the scales and everything because there's so much chaos in him, and that he's wondering if Mark told him everything, and that he doesn't outright say that Mark killed her father, but leads that to be a conclusion that she would reach. So she's kind of pissed off and kind of goes off, and then we see the rest of his kind of group that are whoever's still alive coming in for Arthur and be like, hey, we got this way. And then they kind of like split up. Then we get to Steven going into this too. He's like, all right, off the first shot, this person must be really important. Like, he lists off Thutmose. Let me see here. It was Nefertiri was one of them. I think Thutmose the second. Yeah. And Nefertiri. And you're like, okay, this person had to have been really big and really important. We're seeing all these different kind of things going on, like aspects around the tomb. And then he gets to the sarcophagus, and he noticed that there's Macedonian writings on there. He's like, wait a minute. He called himself Egyptian, and we learned that this is the tomb of Alexander the Great, and he was the last avatar of Amet. And of course, calling himself the voice of Amet. I'm like, where would it be? We need the Ushabti. So he goes into Alexander the Great's throat and pulls it out. It's like, yes, we've got it. And it's like, holy crap. I'm like, oh, that's interesting to tie it in with Alexander the Great and Macedonia and all that. I'm like, ooh, okay. It's really kind of weird because even though there's smaller aspects, I really wish that they kind of dug a little bit more into these things because that's my kind of shit. Like, if you're going into the history and the mythology, now granted, I don't want it to overtake or destroy anything of what's going on with the plot right now. But I do kind of like that interweaving, so a little more, please. A little. Well, Layla comes in and confronts. He's like, alright, Mark's in there. Bring him out. I need to talk to him. And then, of course, they shift, and it's Mark. And she wants to know if he killed her father. And he's like, I always wanted to tell you. And that their whole relationship, he was trying to, like, make up for that whole thing. And he tells us that his partner got greedy, started, like, executing people, and he tried to help her father, and he got killed, too. And then, of course, was resurrected by Khonshu to be his avatar, bringing on this whole kind of thing. So I don't know if it's an actual partner or if it's like a third personality in Mark where it caused this mental break to happen. We'll have to kind of see what goes on with that. And she's like, so that's why they were together, because of making up for the whole father thing and everything. And she's just dumbfounded at all this. And even though he wasn't the one that actually killed her father, she's like, you lie. Like, how could she trust him with all this kind of stuff? And then I think he gave her the Ushabti but I'm not quite sure because things start happening really kind of fast. She kind of hides because Arthur and the rest of his cadre pop up, and he takes up this kind of hatchet from inside Alexander's tomb. He's like, go, go. And he's like, listen, just give me the shop tea, and I can help you. And he's like, you know what, I'm tired of trying to like save people who won't save themselves. And he takes a gun and shoots Mark. And he's pretty much hit center mass and then falls into this water, floats out. And then we get into the weird kind of aspect of the episode. We make it seem that Mark has pretty much been in this mental institution. Because we see all these different kind of people, like the living statue kind of dude, the two police officers, Layla, his boss from the museum, but in different kind of contexts. Somebody drawing a thing that looks like Khonshu. He's like strapped into this wheelchair with a thing that's similar to what Steven was doing. We see this, we get brought up with this like kind of Indiana Jones Adventures kind of movie that's characters Stephen Grant. And we see that Layla pops up telling him that he won this bingo thing, and then he gets pretty much taken off to be talked to by Arthur Harrow, who's looking different than how we've seen him and what we've been following. Now, granted, we'll have to see how this kind of works out. I believe that this is, again, a representation of Mark's mind, and also some kind of afterlife holding area, especially with how it kind of progresses further on. But we see that there are still similar aspects to Arthur Harrow that is within this version. The same sandals, utilizing a cane, saying that he needs to be heavily sedated because of everything going on, and trying to help him deal with everything. How many times he's watched this video, trying to be very supportive of him, but still trying to help him. And he's like, I don't believe you, screw you, tries to get out, but like the orderlies come in, he kind of like takes him down, but Arthur's telling the people not to harm him and everything, and he's like booking it, and he's able to kind of like hide in this one room, and we see that there's a sarcophagus in there, and someone's screaming to be let out, and he opens it, and we see that it's Steven. It's like, hey buddy, and they do a really good job. I love that we've come to a certain point that even though you've essentially got the same actor kind of like acting opposite of themselves, you can barely tell that. I mean, I remember like, shit, I mean, granted, it was even harder before I was born, but like, even when you would see it on like Friends or whatnot, they'd have to do certain kind of camera angles and stuff, and you can now do it where they're like both on screen, and they're like, hey, what the fuck is going on? It's like, I don't know, we gotta get out of here. Something is going fucking nutty. Because they're like, we got shot. He shot us. And it's like, thank you. Like, they're both like, all right, we're on the same page. Shit went down. What the fuck's going on here? And they're just like, all right, we gotta get out of here. They start going through the hall. We see that there's another sarcophagus is the plural. Another sarcophagus with somebody else shaking around, leading more to the third personality that we have pretty much seen laid throughout the rest of this show. So you're like, all right, we're not going to see anything with that at the moment, but it's definitely there. We're going to have to fucking deal with it. So I'm like, all right, we got 2 episodes left. We kind of have to work on it. However, I do believe that it hit a better stride in episode 2 and has continued that stride for these last 3 episodes. So hopefully they can nail that and keep that going as this ends. So they're like, what the fuck's that? So they go to this other door, they open it, and they see this hippopotamus-headed creature, and it's like, oh, hi! And then they scream, and then it cuts. Now, we need to connect some certain dots and everything going on here. I don't know exactly what utilizes and makes a person primed to be an avatar for an Egyptian god within these cases. However, the biggest example we have is that Mark Spector was pretty much gunned down and died before being brought back by Khonshu as an avatar. We don't know if that is what happened with Arthur Harrow, but we see that Mark got killed again, and then we see them talking with another Egyptian god. Now granted, at first you'd probably be thinking, oh, this is Hathor. And it's like, no, this is a Teleret. Teleret? And let me see here. That's like the goddess of fertility and childbirth. So the thing is, Mark got shot and he had no power, so that usually means you're dead. However, this is the Marvel Universe and there's vast fucking systems of this stuff going on. So Taweret might be the thing is we kind of needed some kind of stakes, but also things to probably explain certain aspects of how this shit kind of goes down. Taweret might be more sympathetic and like utilize Mark as an avatar to bring him back to be like, yeah, we kind of need Khonshu to kind of deal with certain shit like this. However, I don't know how that would kind of work. That's just, we need a resurrection kind of protocol at this point. And this seems to be the only way at that point, because they probably look, hey, I'm like, this would be interesting to see. And granted, they wouldn't have the same kind of moon power suit and everything that goes on with it. And I don't know what other kind of strange powers that could be utilized for it. Now, granted, I could be completely off base, and Layla could have made a kind of thing, a deal to become an avatar for an Egyptian god and utilize their powers to resurrect Stephen as well. Because we don't know what are the certain criteria for the avatars at this point. I hope we do get that, because that's kind of important, and I'd kind of like that lore, and it kind of explains certain things. Because Mark is utilized as an avatar, Harrow has been utilized as an avatar, and Layla has potential to be an avatar if we are to believe what Khonshu tells us. Unless Khonshu was like bullshitting and was always essentially just using a sword of Damocles to dangle over Layla's head and be like, do what I want, Mark, I'm gonna fucking take your girlfriend / wife. Ooh. You know what I mean? That definitely sounds like something that Khonshu would do. But we'll kind of have to see how that kind of plays out. I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of kind of cool possibilities and a lot of kind of cool different kind of execution methods that they can go with for this. I hope that works out. That they utilize the potential very well and are able to do awesome things with it. Because I don't care if what I say like works out or not. I just want it to be good. And if I guessed it right and it works right, cool. If I don't, I have no problem with that. I'm like, do what you do, man. So the thing is, we pretty much have Arthur at the end game scenario. He's pretty much able to win. Now we'll have to see how Mark kind of gets back into it and initiates his kind of part of the final confrontation and what that will kind of ensue. I don't know if this will come down to a fight fest, duke out fest. I don't think it should, because Arthur doesn't seem to be the one to go in that kind of physical thing unless you get him to a certain point that he gets back into his kind of Khonshu, Fist of Khonshu, Vengeance kind of route. Since he was one of Khonshu's, he's mainly just been very, very much a cerebral thinking kind of villain at this point, and utilizing everything except violence and physical aggression, except in the point where he shoots Mark. Like, that's the only part where he goes into a violence kind of mode, which is interesting. It's telling. It's like, we've seen that he will go to that extreme if there is something very much in the way of his endgame plan. And that's pretty much what Mark was at that point, just a roadblock, and he needed to remove it. So that's a telling thing when a villain that we've gotten to a certain point isn't utilizing violence, then utilizes violence in one quick kind of extreme way. So we'll have to see if they go kind of hoo-ha, Avatar versus Avatar kind of shit, or if they utilize the Egyptian gods in some other kind of way to kind of figure out what the situation is going to be in. So there's a lot of kind of cool stuff that could go on. I'm like, yay, alright, this sounds pretty cool. Let's see what happens. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.